Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Mr. Pad, Paramahansa, Bhagavadgitacharya, Ashtottara Shri Srimad. His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa, Bhagavadgitacharya, Ashtottara Shri Srimad. His Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur ki Jai. Ananda Koti Vaishnavini ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 30th day of January 2019 in SanDiego, reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. We are in chapter 2, entitled Contents of the Gita Summarized. We're on text 64, page 130. Ragadvesha vimuktais Vishayan indriyaischaran Atmavashya vadheyatma Prasadam adhigacchati Ragadvesha vimuktais Vishayan indriyaischaran Atmavashya vadheyatma Prasadam adhigacchati Ragadvesha vimuktais Vishayan indriyaischaran Atmavashya vadheyatma Prasadam adhigacchati. Tamada. Ragadvesha vimuktais Vishayan indriyaischaran Atmavashya vadheyatma Prasadam adhigacchati. Come on. Ragadvesha vimuktais Vishayan indriyaischaran Atmavashya vadheyatma Prasadam Hadigacchati. Ragadvesha Vimuktaistu. Vishayan Indriyaishcharan. Atmavasya Vadheyatma. Prasadam Hadigacchati. Word by word meanings. Raga, attachment, dvesha, and detachment, vimuktai, by one who has become free from, to, but, vishayan, sense objects, indriyai, by the senses, charan, acting upon, atmavashyai, under one's control, vidheya, atma, one who follows regulated freedom. Prasadam, the mercy of the Lord, adhigacchati, attains. Translation. But a person free from all attachment and aversion and able to control his senses through regulative principles of freedom can obtain the complete mercy of the Lord. Purport. It is already explained that one may externally control the senses by some artificial process, but unless the senses are engaged in the transcendental service of the Lord, there is every chance of a fall. Although the person in full Krishna consciousness may apparently be on the sensual plane, because of his being Krishna conscious, he has no attachment to sensual activities. The Krishna-conscious person is concerned only with the satisfaction of Krishna and nothing else. Therefore, he is transcendental to all attachment and detachment. If Krishna wants, the devotee can do anything which is ordinarily undesirable, and if Krishna does not want, he shall not do that which he would have ordinarily done for his own satisfaction. Therefore, to act or not to act is within his control, because he acts only under the direction of Krishna. This consciousness is the causeless mercy of the Lord, which the devotee can achieve in spite of his being attached to the sensual platform. You got it, page 130, 131? Okay. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandjana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilatam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So this little word tu is often very important, tu, and it generally means but. It's never at the beginning of a verse. I discovered that. And here it means, so it's turned a corner. It says, on the other hand, and so what's the previous hand? The previous hand, or the first hand, is text 62 and 63, in which he described the degradation of the soul, the standard practice, where one meditates on the objects of the senses. This word vishaya is the theme here. It keeps coming up. Vishaya vinivartante, 459. So, meditating on the objects of the senses, one develops an attachment for them. And from such attachment, lust develops. So you get meditation, dhyaya dopajana, and then you get attached, and then it becomes stronger, and you have kama. And kama, as we know, is the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world. And from attachment, lust develops, and from lust, anger arises. Why? Because lust is ever-increasing, never satisfied, and because we are spiritual beings, we have our vague memory of unlimited, ever-increasing pleasure in service to the Lord, but we can't enjoy that on this material plane. And so there's frustration, and that frustration breeds anger. And then the next verse, 63, he says, from anger, complete delusion arises, and from delusion, bewilderment of memory. When memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost, and when intelligence is lost, one falls down again into the material pool. So what he's saying there is, buddhinasha, pranashyati, the living entity is completely destroyed. Of course, you can't be killed, but it means you're deep in the entanglement of the material world for who knows how many millions of eons. On the other hand, that's the first hand. On the other hand, so to really find out how this verse works, Atma Bhasha Vidheyatma, the key phrase is Vidheyatma, which means practicing the regulative principles of freedom. Prabhupada's famous word here. The devotees who are serious about traversing the path of bhakti marga, we have to practice what's called Vaidhi Bhakti or Vidhi Bhakti. Vidhi Bhakti means devotional service according to the rules and regulations. You may or may not feel spontaneously attracted to perform a specific service, but whether you do or not, you have to perform it. That's Vidhi, on the basis of duty. Duty means that you accept a higher authority. The very word means. And so that's the vidheya, the same word, Atma means the soul is following these vidis. And by doing though, you develop the ability to control the self, control Atma Vashara. And the result is that even when the senses are moving among the Vishayas, the objects of the senses, that's what Vishayan Indriyais Charan means. In other words, we don't achieve real detachment by ragya, which is what we're looking for, by running away from the objects of the senses, by never agreeing to see things that are attractive, or never tasting any food that's nice, or hearing nice music, or all of the senses have their particular objects, because as we learned in the 59. You may not consume them by going off or practicing some severe austerity and not engaging in sense gratification, but the desire is there in the heart. And the desire is after all, what's going to bring you back to take another body. That's the determining factor, your mentality. So the question is how to purify the consciousness of this mood of sense gratification. And these ideas, how to really purify so that even the desires aren't there. And that's the process of bhakti under regulation. And then one can be free of raga and dvesha, raga dvesha vimukta, even when amongst the sense objects. And that's the central practice of this movement. We don't all run off to isolated places or idyllic places and try to avoid the object. We're in the middle of the city here. We're three blocks from the beach, Southern California beach. But how to remain detached even when in the presence of the object of the senses? By developing that attachment for Krishna. What is that? Yat pada pungata palasha valasa bhaktya karmasha yam kudita mudgata yanti santa. This is a nice instruction from Sanat Kumara to Maharaj Prithu in the 4th canto. We'll be coming up on it soon in our morning class. So Prabhupada will often quote this first. Pada pankaja palasha bilasa bhaktya. By the process of bhakti, devotional service, to the lotus feet of Krishna. Now here he's got this very poetic thing. Pada pankaja palasha. If you have a lotus foot, then you have, what are the petals? The petals are the toes. So you're serving the toes of the lotus feet of the Lord. In other words, with great meditation and attachment and love. That produces a certain vilas, or pleasure, spiritual pleasure. And from that, karmashayan gratitam udgratayanti santa, the saints, the devotees, experience that their karmashaya. Ashaya means this longing, is an aspiration. Karma means fruit of longing, you see, which takes the form of knots in the heart. Gratitam. So they are udgratayanti, they're untied or cut by experiencing through the process of devotional service the pleasure of bhakti. And then the rest of the verse says, Tadvanna rikta matayo yatayopi ruddhasroto danaskamadanam bhajabhasadevam. Others, but to speak of the karmis, we're talking about serious yogis and sages and tapasvis and impersonalists who are rikta mataya, whose minds are empty of bhakti. They're devoid of bhakti. They may have a lot of austerity or whatever, pious credits, but they are eventually swept away by the desires in the heart. The greatest yogis, there's so many examples from Bhagavatam. The famous Vishwamitra Muni meditating in the forest, very powerful yogi, has so many siddhis. And what usually happens, Indra gets worried that they're going to take over his position. So in this case, he says, oh my God, he's going to take my position. He sends down Menaka to allure him. So he's got his eyes closed in meditation. How's she going to learn? So she just walks nearby with the tinkling ankle bells, and that's enough. Opens his eyes, and there she is. It's all over. So where was the detachment? Many hundreds of thousands of years of meditation, but the desire is still there. Saubhari Muni is another famous one. He's in the Yamuna River. He's literally in the river. He's meditating under the water for who knows how long, thousands of years. But he wasn't taking advantage. He's in Vrindavan, in Yamuna, but instead of bathing the Yamuna and going and chanting Hare Krishna and seeing the deity, he's underneath the water, And so so he opens his eyes and there's a couple of fish copulating. It's too much. I want to go. So where was the detachment? You see the problem? But here, the simple instruction. Raga dvesha vimuktais too, vishayan indriya. Even when the senses are amongst their objects, one can be free of attachment and not detachment so much. Detachment in this purport means aversion. You notice the difference. We want detachment. Detachment is vairagya. So in this particular Prabhupada means the aversion by detachment. That's what dvesha means. So one could be vimukta, completely free, if one is following this principle. And what happens at the end? Prasadam, you get the grace of the Lord. And then, by the grace of the Lord, you experience more and more and deeper varieties of transcendental pleasure. And there's no question of sense gratification. Any more than now, we can feel, oh, let's go to McDonald's. You want to go? No. You know, 60 years ago, or maybe when I was like a kid, 15, I would be like, anyway, about 57 years ago, why not? We go bowling, then we go to McDonald's. I told you, they opened when they started McDonald's in 1961 or whatever it was. I remember it was just right near where I used to bowl every Friday night. We had this bowling thing. Oh, now we can go get a hamburger. We didn't think twice about it. Now you wouldn't think twice about going. It's just, who even could imagine it? You know what I'm saying? So what changed? I'm the same soul. Body's changed, but consciousness has changed. Krishna is purifying. So many questions on this important verse. Now he's going to say what happens when you get the prasad. We're talking about real grace here. Prasadam is prasadam. That's all. Prasade sabadukkanam hanirasyopajáyate prasanna chetaso yashu buddhi parihipatishtate. For one thus satisfied in Krishna consciousness, the threefold miseries of material existence exist no longer. In such satisfied consciousness, one's intelligence is soon well established. So Prabhupada didn't write a purport here, but he uses the word prasanna, which he usually translates as natural joy of the soul coming out. So this is good. Buddhi pariyavatistate, that's the fixed consciousness he explained in the previous verses. Text 66. Nasti buddhira yuktasya nachayuktasya bhavana nachabhavyata kshantir ashantasya kutak sukham. And here again, you notice he goes back and forth. Now he's saying, on the other hand, without the prasadam, and without being fixed in Krishna consciousness, nothing good happens. One who is not connected with the Supreme in Krishna consciousness can have neither transcendental intelligence nor a steady mind, without which there is no possibility of peace, and how can there be any happiness without peace? Purport. Unless one is in Krishna consciousness, there is no possibility of peace. That's a good one to remember. So it is confirmed in the 5th chapter, 529, that when one understands that Krishna is the only enjoyer of all the good results of sacrifice and penance, that he is the proprietor of all universal manifestations, and that he is the real friend of all living entities, then only can one have real peace. Therefore, if one is not in Krishna consciousness, there cannot be a final goal for the mind. Disturbance is due to want of an ultimate goal, and when one is certain that Krishna is the enjoyer, proprietor, and friend of everyone and everything, then one can, with a steady mind, bring about peace. Therefore, one who is engaged without a relationship with Krishna is certainly always in distress and is without peace, however much he may make a show of peace and spiritual advancement in life. Krishna consciousness is a self-manifested peaceful condition which can be achieved only in relationship with Krishna. So here we have these, two important verses, these three important verses. In order to get the mercy of the Lord, without which there's no possibility of peace, one has to practice regulated devotional service and move along on the path of devotion. And what's the advantage? 65. Sarva dukkanam hanir, all your miseries are destroyed. That alone should induce us to practice chant Hare Krishna. Asya upajayate. And then on the positive side, prasanna cetasa, very joyful heart. Prasanna really means not only joyful, but clear consciousness. Prasanna, pellucid. I don't know if you've ever heard that word, but ashu, quickly, it doesn't take many births. And buddhi pariyavatistate, your consciousness, your intelligence is fixed. This is all to be desired. And without the fixed consciousness, which he mentioned at the end, which can't be gotten without the prasad, ayuktasya, without being connected to Krishna, the mind or the intelligence can't be fixed. Because you haven't reached the ultimate rest for your awareness. You know, there's no possibility of peace without the final goal of the mind. Without being connected, you cannot have bhavana. Bhavana here is fixed mind and happiness. And without that bhavana, where is there any peace? And without peace, how can there be any happiness? So he's got a very nice argument here. Without practicing regular devotional service, you can't be free of raga and dvesha. Therefore, your mind is always disturbed. Okay. So, and if you do practice, you get the prasad. And if you get the prasadam of the Lord, the grace of the Lord, then all your miseries are destroyed and you become fully joyful, because you're connected to Krishna. But without that connection, you can't. The intelligence can't be fixed, and therefore you can't attain a happy state of Krishna consciousness, bhavana. And without this bhava, there can't be any peace, and without peace, there can't be any happiness. So obviously, the conclusion is we should all practice Krishna consciousness if we want to control the senses. Now he goes back and he says, but the senses are very powerful, and just like a powerful wind, any one of the senses can drag the mind, like the mind is like a boat and can drag it away. Text 67. Indriyanam ichadatam yanmano navadhiyate tatasya hatati pragyam vayurnabhamabambasi. As a strong wind sweeps away a boat on the water, even one of the roaming senses on which the mind focuses can carry away a man's intelligence. Purport: unless all of the senses are engaged in the service of the Lord, even one of them engaged in sense gratification can deviate the devotee from the path of transcendental advancement. As mentioned in the life of Maharaj Ambarish, all of the senses must be engaged in Krishna consciousness, for that is the correct technique for controlling the mind. So sometimes, it's said that spiritual advancement is like filling a pot full of water, but if you deviate a little bit, you poke a hole in that pot and the whole thing drains away. So all of the senses have to be engaged in Krishna consciousness. And you see that Rupa Goswami, and following Lord Chaitanya, he created a beautiful program and Srila Prabhupada, of course, manifested it in his teachings and creation of this movement. How all of the senses can be engaged. Certainly the ears and the tongue are the first engagement. Hearing and chanting. But the tongue is also good for tasting. And what about the seeing? Oh, we see the beautiful deity, we see the beautiful paintings, we see the beautiful forms of the devotees. There's so much to see. Here, and you ever realize what a aratik is? You're touching the lamp, right? And the water. Sometimes it's cold and it's touching. Okay, it's Krishna, it's blessing Krishna. Remember that, right? Smelling the fragrance of the incense. All the senses are engaged. The touch, embracing the devotees also. So that without that full engagement, then it's a big battle, which very few can, if any, can emerge victorious. Just by your own will, First of all, you have to go alone. Krishna said in the 6th chapter, go alone, go away, far away. Why do you have to go alone? Because you'll be diverted. Your senses will be diverted. By nonsense talk, by this, by that, by this, by that. So go alone to a cave, mountain, isolated forest, retreat. And there, what? Well, practice the pranayama, work on the mind. Then what? Then the problem is, even if you succeed a little bit, then you're going to develop these powers. Those themselves are diversions for the mind. You're sitting there all alone, and you've developed these yogic powers, and you can get anything you want from anywhere, So, if you're not purified, you may get something that will be completely divert you. So many yogis came to America in the 60s and the early 70s, and they had some power, some little influence, but they got tangled up in all of the opulence of America. Prabhupada never did. When he got that, the Detroit temple, it actually had been owned by one of the big automobile magnates, So it was like the most opulent place in ISKCON at that time. He was still building Bombay and so forth, So Prabhupada, he got it for much cheaper than it should have been, So it was a very nice facility. He could have just retired there. Or he could have retired at his place in Hawaii and lived in that ideal way. Anywhere. He had all the servants and everything. Never did it. He always felt he had to go here, go there, take care of the devotees, worry about the building of the Mayapur, the books going out, writing the books. So that is proof that he never really was allured by the opulences that accrued to a powerful devotee. Whereas the yogis often do. At least they get involved in these cities, as we see with Devasa Muni and Vishwamitra and all the others. So that's the power of devotional service that the yogis can't have. So now he concludes in text 68. Tasmad yasya mahabaho nigrihitani sarvashaha indriyanindriyardebhyas tasya pragyapatishtita. Therefore, O mighty armed one whose senses are restrained from their objects is certainly of steady intelligence. Purport: one can curb the forces of sense gratification only by means of Krishna consciousness, or engaging all the senses in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. As enemies are curbed by superior force, the senses can similarly be curbed not by any human endeavor, but only by keeping them engaged in the service of the Lord. One who has understood this, that only by Krishna consciousness is one really established in intelligence, and that one should practice this art under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master, is called a sadhaka, or a suitable candidate for liberation. So, if you recall, there's a whole section here, pragya pratishtita. This was the theme going all the way back to text 54, where Krishna is explaining to Arjuna what are the symptoms of one whose consciousness is merged in transcendence. Because he said, samadhavatala buddhis in text 53, when your mind is not longer disturbed by the flowery language of the Vedas, when it remains fixed in trance of self-realization, then you will have attained the divine consciousness of yoga. Samadha, achala means fixed, not deviating. So then Arjuna wants to know, how do I recognize someone whose consciousness is thus merged in transcendence? How does he speak? What is his language? How does he sit? How does he walk? And then in the subsequent verses, Krishna is describing that. Prajahati yada kaman sarvan parta manogatan. First one is like really radical, to reject all desires that arise from the mind, and who are fixed in the self, tushta, satisfied in self, the supreme self. Stita pragya, that word pragya is used in this verse that was text 68. Tasya pragya patishtita. Astita pragyas tadochate. It's the same meaning. So he's describing in several verses, he used the analogy of the tortoise who draws his limbs. Then he gave us this very important verse about how you may by force renounce the objects of the senses, but the desire will remain. And so that's not going to help you ultimately. But if you can directly perceive the transcendence by coming in touch with Krishna consciousness, you can remain fixed in consciousness and free of the desire. So it's a struggle. It is an endeavor to remain fixed in this transcendental consciousness with your senses under control, always engaged in Krishna consciousness. And so he says, those senses that forcibly carry away the mind even of a man of discrimination who's endeavoring to control them. So what's the remedy? By engaging all of them in relation to me. This is really the theme here. Tani sarvani sangmimya yukta asita matpadaha. Matpadaha. This is the first place Krishna mentions himself as the real object of yoga. Right here in text 2, set 61. Then pragyapatishtita, it's again the same words we used again. And then he describes those two verses how you can become completely covered and completely destroyed by meditating on the objects of the senses, which is what this whole culture is all about. And then as the verse we started with today, you can become free of the raga and dvesha by practicing the regulative principles of devotional service. Then you get the prasad or grace of the Lord, and you become completely free of misery and naturally joyful. And then he says, but be careful, because even one of the senses can act like a powerful wind, carry weight. And therefore, one whose senses are controlled through Krishna consciousness is a man of steady consciousness. Okay, one or two more. Maybe we can finish this chapter. We're moving so nicely. This is the famous night and day verse. How the devotees and the materialists are opposites, 180 degrees. Text 69. Ya nisa sarva bhutanam tasyam jagarti sangyami yasyam jagrati bhutani sa nisha pasyato mane. What is night for all beings is the time of awakening for the self-controlled. And the time of awakening for all beings is night for the introspective sage. Purport. There are two classes of intelligent men. One is intelligent in material activities for sense gratification, and the other is introspective and awake to the cultivation of self-realization. Activities of the introspective sage or thoughtful man are night for persons materially absorbed. Materialistic persons remain asleep in such a night due to their ignorance of self-realization. The introspective sage remains alert in the night of the materialistic men. The sage feels transcendental pleasure in the gradual advancement of spiritual culture, whereas the man in materialistic activities, being asleep to self-realization, dreams of varieties of sense pleasure, feeling sometimes happy and sometimes distressed in his sleeping condition. The introspective man is always indifferent to materialistic happiness and distress. He goes on with his self-realization activities, undisturbed by material reactions. So, this is a description of the opposite mentalities of the materialist and the true spiritualist, or the devotee. This verse is very, because in my years in Krishna consciousness, I often lived outside of a temple, although I always went to a temple in the morning, as I do today, all these years. So naturally you get up, getting up at 3:30 or 3 o'clock, So everyone else is sleeping. And but in this particular area where we are, it's a party area. So oftentimes they have these late night parties. It used to be more so. It's a little more calm now than it used to be. And they would be going on, past midnight, and into 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, sometimes 3 o'clock, especially on the weekend, So I'd be walking the Mangalarti, or I'd get up and I'd hear the party still going on. Luckily, my immediate neighbor below me was also a devotee for many years. Mohan Vilas and his family, they stayed there. This is like for 20 years, or maybe 15 years. And I always sleep with the earplugs, and stuff. So I get up, and you can hear the parties going on down the street, and everything. But by the time I'm ready to go to Mangalarti at 4:20, the parties have all ended. They're crashing. And and then when the whole morning program is over, and we're taking breakfast, I used to take breakfast here, it's 8:30 and 8:45, they're still not up, they're sleeping, especially on Sunday morning, So it's exactly this night and day business, But more importantly, the whole endeavor of the materialist to struggle so hard to enjoy and make money and all this is it's just not, that's just not part of what you're doing. You've given that up. And because many devotees, they tried that. I certainly did I joined, I was 25 years old. And it was just like depressing. It was, luckily I was a failure. I wasn't able to really succeed in that regard. So you turn to Krishna consciousness, and you realize, the happiness is really right there with you. You just don't, you haven't accessed it. I remember just meditating. I had made up my own little process of devotionals of yoga. I was meditating on the Hare Krishna mantra in my mind mostly. I would chant a little bit and then I would meditate. It's very easy. It's perfectly okay. And I'd be feeling transcendental. I would be feeling a little happiness. I knew a little bit about Krishna. But there was nothing external. It wasn't anything sensual. It wasn't any beads that I was using, And so you get this understanding, especially if you read the philosophy, that you have all of this potential to enjoy without all of this paraphernalia and this external business. And so that's like a great revelation. So that's precisely what the devotees are doing. They're diving deep into the ocean of spiritual happiness, which is not really dependent on anything material. Certainly not on a lot of money and work and anxiety. And so they see the poor conditioned souls as making a huge mistake. They're struggling very hard for something which is impossible to achieve. Happiness and peace on the material platform. How can there be peace when your whole existence is on the realm of destruction? There's that wonderful verse that Mahavishnu Maharaj told me. He taught me many years ago. He was the elder, he passed away about 12, 15 years now. But he used to come and visit here a lot, even before he was a sannyasi. And then he took sannyas, and then he went to Dwarka. He built up ISKCON Dwarka in India. So we're standing in line in Vrindavan. It's the early 90s. He's standing in line because he's the brahmachari. I'm a brahmachari. We're standing in line to get prasadam. And so, as I often would then, and even now, I say, would you like to hear a nice shloka? Especially when there's kind of a situation where someone is trapped. The devotees are, and they and so they often say, yes, sure. He loved the verses. So I gave him some verse which I forget, and he gave me this verse. And so I learned it, and I put it into a little poem. So, De heshti mangsururi rebi matam chajasva, jaya asutaricha sadama matam vimuncha, pushani sham jagaditam chanapanga tishtam, vairagya raga rasiko bhava bhakti nishtam. It's from the Padma Purana, something like that. So he says, don't love the body, just a bag of flesh and blood and bone. Give up your sense of ownership for all you think you own. At every moment, see that your world totters on destruction. Become detached and learn to love the Lord without obstruction. So that last line, vairagya raga, is great. Get attachment for detachment. Become attached to detachment. Like the ideal is Raghunath Das Goswami. I think he used the phrase, this metaphor, embrace the maiden of vairagya. You know what I mean? Really get into. So, material life is like that, especially that third line. See that, your situation here is unsteady. You don't know what's going to happen. And so the conclusion to that is that therefore don't waste any time. Immediately strive for advancement in devotional service. Like it said in the Bhagavatam. Labdvasudurlamamidam bahusambhavante manushyam artadamanichmapi hadira. So he's saying you've attained this rare human form of life after many, many births in lower species, or even other human forms that have brought you to this point where you're a little contemplative, And so you've got the human form of life, which is artadam, which can give you the real goal of existence. In other forms, lower forms, you have no idea. All you can do is struggle for existence, try to live, reproduce and die. But here in the human form, you have the intelligence, you can think. So he said artadam, but like all other forms, it's anityam. It's not permanent, it's very temporary. So one has to be dhira, means calm and contemplative, and to really understand what's the goal of life. And so the advice in the third line is, Turnam yateta. Turnam mateta napateta numrityavat. As long as you haven't died yet, death is following you, anumityu. So remember that. You haven't fallen down, but they didn't died. So you should strive for what? Nikshayasa, the ultimate good, which is liberation from material life and birth and death and going back to God. Because Vishayan, here's the word Vishaya, comes up again and again in this chapter. Nikshayasaya Vishayan. Kalusarvataksat. In all those other forms we mentioned at the beginning of the verse, you've experienced all varieties of sense gratification already. So you've already done that, and look where it got you. Into this, you're still suffering birth and death. So but the key phrase, therefore, turnam, without delay, you should strive. This is the real key. Not that we just, we become dilettantes. There's no time to waste because you're under the gun here. You're in the material world. Everything can fail. Everything is, the heart is beating, the lungs are working, everything is working in the body now. You've still got a little time, but we know from experience, and obviously that can be changed at any time, either from external influences, internal influences, threefold miseries. So therefore, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Don't waste it. Hare Krishna. So we'll complete this chapter on Monday. Unless there are any comments or questions. Go ahead, I'll repeat your question. Go ahead. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Well, well, we have to always remember that in the center of all of this, practice, is Krishna. There's Krishna. We're not just serving, not just becoming peaceful because what we're not doing. The reason I bring up Krishna, because the whole actual advancement that we feel, okay, how does it actually work? You come in touch with a devotee somehow or other, either directly or through some medium, a book, YouTube, something. Somehow or other, there's an impression that's created on you, which, if you're fortunate, sparks a little interest, a little curiosity to pursue that, either by clicking. Oftentimes the pursuit comes by just clicking on the keyboard, and you look up Hare Krishna, Google, and there's a million sites. If you're lucky enough to get. So you get, and there's, before long, there you find, there's a temple near where I live, or here's some books I can buy, or I can listen to this, or somewhere or other you pursue it. And the result is that you hopefully, are able to be exposed to the philosophy, because it's important that we understand that without cultivation of the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, our involvement can be very flighty. Just on the basis of it, whatever makes me feel good. I didn't like that lecture, or whatever. I have something else to do this time. It's all very much of that's why I said dilettante. You're not really serious. That's good, but you're not going to move forward. It'll ever remain on kind of a sentimental platform. And there's a whole sampradayas that are on that line, like the what we call the upasampradayas, offshoots. I mean, the history of this movement, meaning Lord Chaitanya's movement of Krishna consciousness, which began in the 16th century, is that it was eclipsed for a long time by sentimental movements like the sahajiya. The sahajiya means very easy. Take it easy. Don't all of these great strictures. Let's just chant dance. Chant Hare Krishna. We'll think of Radha and Krishna, and then we can do whatever we want. It becomes very sentimental. That's precisely what, is that it feels good. This part of Krishna consciousness doesn't feel so good, But this one, I really like this, the dancing and everything, which is okay as far as it goes, but it can easily be perverted. And that happened, the actual movement of Lord Chaitanya was eclipsed for hundreds of years. That's why when Bhaktivinoda Thakur came on the scene in the mid-19th century, he couldn't find a Chaitanya Charitamrita. He couldn't find it. It had gone out of print, it was eclipsed, he spent years. And finally found one and read it, and that manifested his nature as a pure devotee and started from there. So what I'm saying is that by the process of devotional service, we'll experience certain periods of ecstasy. Let's call them ecstasy. But in the beginning, it's very hard to sustain that, because the mind is not fixed. It's not, and there are so many latent desires and conditionings that we really haven't worked out. And so we have to come to the platform. That's why Vaidhi Bhakti means that we understand the principle. Even though the last thing I want to do right now is get up. You know, it's only 3:30. I'm not used to doing that. You know, and besides, I got to bed late last night or whatever. You know what I mean? And so, but then it kicks in. Oh, wait a minute. You know, I'm in the ashram here. Everybody's getting up. I'm supposed to get up, and if I don't, you know, I'll feel worse. And so you do it. You know, I mean that works all the time in the outside world. You don't want to get up. You got to get up because if I don't get to work on time, I may get fired. You know, so the intelligence kicks in and the memory, and you do what you don't want to do. But it may never come to the point of spontaneously getting up for the material side. But what it will for the spiritual side, because Krishna is there. He's giving you whatever we experience in Krishna consciousness of pleasure, of transcendental pleasure. And it may be just a few moments of, you know, shadow ecstasy, whatever it may be. That's coming from Krishna. Because we did something that really pleased him. We focused a little more of our mind. We went out of our way. We somehow or other became absorbed in Krishna consciousness sincerely for even a short period of time. And that's what produces the happiness. You know, and it's all completely personal. When Krishna sees us making an effort to give someone else Krishna consciousness, that is very pleasing to him, and you feel it when you're a devotee. You know, that's so Krishna is always in the middle there. And yes, we can remember those times as impetuses for when we are a little dry, or, you know, we've hit a dry patch, so to speak. We know now that it's possible to experience those things, and so we have to stay on and, you know, avoid the offenses. Don't do anything crazy that will really damage our good standing in devotional service. So it's always good to remember how the process works. It's a purification, so that all the things that we're doing now on the Vaidhi platform are the matter of duty, and experiencing a little pleasure or peace, or occasionally, will become sources of great pleasure. Tulsi Puja. We were discussing how they're on the very intimate platform. Prabhupada gave it to us. You know, I mean, at a certain point, you'll be chanting away, tears will be flowing, you'll be haripalating. That's a hair standing on end. We don't say goosebumps, but that's actually what. Anyway, whereas for so many years, you know, you're chanting away, and maybe the mind's wandering a little bit, you know, and you're thinking, well, okay, I'll get to my job as soon. I really need to make up a couple of rounds from yesterday, whatever, you know. But the focus is there, the mood is there, your heart is pure, and therefore everything in Krishna consciousness becomes that much sweeter, because Krishna is always there. You know, people walk in this temple and they experience it new, and, you know, we're kind of used to it. But actually, if we look, you know, they look at these beautiful, you know, Leela paintings and all of this, and all the work that went into it. You know, appreciating the service of the other devotees who made this happen. So the experience of everything we do, just the name itself, the holy name. That's really the bottom line. We experience the name. How do we can learn how the great devotees experience it, and have something to strive for. Tunde tandavanira ting vatanote tundavali labdehe. This is Rupa Goswami. Oh, I don't know how much nectar these two syllables Krishna have produced. When I chant them, they seem to dance within the mouth. I want to have millions of tongues and mouths to taste the name. And when they enter the ears, I want to have millions of ears to hear that sweet name. And then he entered the courtyard of the heart, and I just become completely fixed on Krishna. All the senses become inert. He's actually experiencing that. He's revealing. So we can worship that, you know, but we should learn about it. And that's what we're studying on Monday morning. Rupa Goswami, in Vidagnamadava, his play. And we read Monday morning, this in the Upadeshamrita, he's describing this very process. He says, Syat Krishna Nama Charitari Satapya Vidya Pitto Patapta Rasarasada Rochikanu. The name, form, qualities of Krishna are sweet as anything. Syat Krishna Nama Charitari Sita. Sita means very sweet. But even though that's the case, because we're now full of so much ignorance, our senses are covered with all these impurities. They don't taste sweet, and they may even taste bitter, meaning that it's a chore to hear and chant. But kint vadanat anudinang, day after day, if one still chants them anyway, as a matter of duty, trying to avoid the offenses, then gradually the disease of ignorance is destroyed, and the natural sweetness retains. Our senses, our mind becomes more sensitized and able to relish what's already there, the real sweetness of Krishna's name. So that's where we, knowing that is out there, and we can experience little hints of it. It's not all or nothing. It's not that you're in an art in the vritti, you're not tasting anything for so many years, and suddenly everything comes. But even in the beginning taste, there's some ruchi there, otherwise we wouldn't continue. Prabhupada knew that. He'd get them chanting, sitting in a bowery somewhere up in some big loft, pounding a little bongo drum. You hear it, there's no kartals or anything, just Prabhupada playing, and chanting his heart out. And there's a few people, chanting, trying to... And Prabhupada knew that would, somewhere out there's somebody who's it's going to strike and help me. And sure enough, he got some initiates, Karla Pati, we never heard of him again, But among all those people, there was one named Michael Grant, who was a musician and who was really into it, and helped Prabhupada, okay, oh yeah, I can help. And he knew the ins and outs of the village. He got him the 26th Avenue, Well, that started the whole thing. And then he was able to have his own controlled environment away from the Bowery, which is crazy and dirty. And he was right in the middle of the historical place where a whole bunch of kids were coming, and they've been tripping or not, but they were searching, and they were open to it. They had already gotten some experience of something beyond. It may have been some hallucination, but they were thinking there's something beyond this material world. So they were open. And chanting away, Prabhupada's chanting away, an hour-long kirtan. When's the last time we had an hour-long kirtan? So that's the process. The purification produces the ability to really experience Krishna consciousness, what it is. So, I don't know if that answers your question, but this is what happens on Dvadashi. You fast all day, and I get a little bit spontaneous. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.